but I don't think that people on the East Coast and the West Coast think of it, and plus Texas is really, really far away if
It's
you're from, like
far from everybody
it's
except
far.
people in Texas, and even some people in Texas, it's far
Oh, no,
for
it's
them.
if you live in Texas, Texas is far from Texas.
Like,
You could you could live in Texas and be like, "Yeah, that part of Texas, really far."
that's
Yeah,
far.
Big Bend National Park, I'll never get there. It's Texas, but it's far Texas. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the RV Atlas. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about our first book, which was published in 2016, but is coming out in a second edition next Tuesday. I believe that's March 21st. And it's a book about the 40 best RV vacations in the country. So we're going to talk about what's in the book, give you a sneak peek of the book. And Stephanie, who totally refreshed this book over last summer. I was not involved in that. She took that project on. She's going to talk about what has changed in the RV industry, in the camping industries, basically in the last 10 years, because this gave her a chance to go back and look at the book and everything that we were thinking and writing about 10 years ago, and then see how it has all changed. So, Stephanie, welcome to the show and great job on the second edition of RV Vacations, our very first book.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on to talk about our second edition.
Anytime. I mean, it's a big deal to get a book
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
second edition. That's not, I mean, this is the first time we've had a second edition. So I want to say
yeah,
this, like, if you bought this book 8 years ago, you need to buy it again, people, because it's really totally been updated.
yeah, and so yes, every single entry, every single phone number and email address and everything was checked, right? And if there were any differences, if a campground had closed or a restaurant had closed, and believe me, this was written before the pandemic. We'll talk more about what needed to be changed, but this was obviously written before 2020. So a lot changed, right? Especially in the travel industry over those couple years. So there was a lot to change, and we did it. And there were some things that weren't changed, and we'll talk about that also. But it was really interesting. This is our second edition, so just sometimes people like a little behind the curtain. So the publisher reached out to us, like we didn't know that this was going to get a refresh, and the publisher had reached out to us and they said, "Hey, we're ready to do a second edition on this. Will you both do it?" And it was a very busy time for us. We had some deadlines, big
My
deadlines.
gut reaction was no. I mean, I honestly
Yeah.
wanted to say no. I can't, which I now, in
Right.
retrospect, I'm like, that would have been stupid.
Yeah, and that, you mentioned, "Oh, Stephanie did it." Well, because your gut reaction was no, my gut reaction was yes, because here's what happens. If you don't wanna do the refresh, it's not that they don't put out a second edition, they just get somebody else to do it. And the thought of having somebody else writing anything in our book, that we couldn't say, like, this is what we agree with, or this, like, it horrified me. So I said, well, I want to say yes. And obviously, if I say yes, I have to take responsibility for doing this. So it was my nights and weekends for, I would say, like maybe what do you think? It took like over the course of like maybe 2 months. I
Yeah.
was like chipping things out over nights and weekends.
Yeah, and look, writing a book is a lot of hard work, but I think I've never even asked you this. I think you enjoyed this project. I think you enjoyed going back and looking at something that kinda
I
helped
did
start our
not enjoy
careers.
it. Yeah, yeah, I did not enjoy it. It was relatively right, like, it wasn't writing a book, right? When you're fact checking, it's not the weight of writing a book, so it's a little easier to do after a long day at work or something like that, right? You're not, like, reaching for some sort of, like, creative juice. So, I did not enjoy it. Um, the thing it was interesting, like, I'll be honest, I haven't opened the book in years, right? Like, it was our first book. We've been putting out other books. We talked about this in the last episode or 2 episodes ago where I just said, like, this book was our first book and we appreciate everything about it, but it was also very prescribed, right? Like, it was an idiot's guide at the time. It's not now. They've rebranded it. But it was like, here's your template and this is what every chapter looks like. So it had it wasn't like our personal creation, which our later books were. So, I hadn't looked at it, and I'll be honest, when I was looking at it, I was like, "Oh, this is good." That's what I think the nicest part about it was, is that I was actually pleasantly surprised by revisiting our work, so that was a nice experience. I'm
Yeah,
very critical.
and it's
You know this,
really
like, I hate everything I do.
well, which is why a lot of it comes out so great, I think, right? Because 'Cause you're very particular. So look,
I'm very
the
particular.
structure of the book is that it gives you, what we're making the case, these are the 40 best RV vacations in the country, which obviously people could argue about around the campfire, and it's quite a different book than the Where Should We Camp Next books, because it really is not centered around campground reviews, it's
Mhm.
centered around the vacations. So
Right.
like the main body of each chapter does have 3 campground reviews, but then it also has 3 restaurant reviews, 3 attractions, and it's the
Yeah.
same amount of word count for all of it. So like the restaurant, there's just as many words written about restaurants and attractions as there are about campgrounds.
And then there's itineraries too, like suggested itineraries, which, we changed a little bit too, and we can talk about that. But it was interesting because I think looking at this, I realized how much more this was like a guidebook as opposed to our other books. Like, our other books
Yeah.
are much more topical, like, for campgrounds, um, and with tips and tricks involved, but this is, like, more of a traditional guidebook, and we weren't doing, like, off the beaten path stuff, right? Like, when you're saying the 40 best RV vacations in the country, it wasn't like we were finding hidden treasures. It was an idiot's guide. It was like, these are the bucket list, right? RV trips
Yeah.
for people.
And I don't, it's
We weren't
funny.
trying to be, like, smart.
I don't remember I don't remember too much about writing this book. Like, we typically like, split the chapters in a book, right? I don't remember which chapters I wrote and which chapters you wrote. I do remember them
Oh,
asking us for a list of, like, "Well, okay, so
yes.
what do you think the 40 best RV vacations were?" And, there was back and forth, and they had input on that. But I do remember, like, I wanted Cooperstown in there, and they were like, "No." They were like, "You
No.
can't put that in there." No,
That's not
they
a
were like,
bucket list.
yeah, they were like, "It's too regional. It's not
Yeah.
like a national bucket list trip." And, maybe in retrospect, they were right, but they
Do you
had,
remember we put that remember you had that KOA map? Do you remember that? You had that KOA map they used to send out. I don't know if they send those out
yeah.
anymore, hanging in the garage, and you brought it into the living room and set it down on the living room floor, and we, like, laid out with, like, little stickies, the trips that we were, recommending because we needed, like, regional diversity, and we used different color codes for, like, what a national park trip was or what like, so we had these different categories, and we were trying to find that balance, and I just remember laying out the map. Yeah, it was a long time ago.
And it's cool because some of the trips are thematic. It's not just like one
Right.
destination, but it's like, "Oh, do this stretch of Route 66 or
Mhm.
do these Civil War battlefields," even though that'll require driving to, a few different
Bourbon Trail,
locations.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
it is a super cool book, and I'm so glad that it has been reborn. It even has a brand new cover, with the cover photo by the amazing Mandy Lee, and that's really been one cool thing for me is they always ask us, like, who do you want
Yeah.
to do the cover photo?" And last time we had Monica Bennett do it, one of our absolute favorite photographers, and this time Mandy Lee did it, and she's one of
Yeah.
our absolute favorite photographers. So that was, like, certainly, a
I
cool.
remember saying to them, we refuse to have like like the typical stock photo of the Class C RV that is like every RV book out there or whatever. We were like, that is not
Eh
acceptable for
well, and
us.
some of those photos ended up in the book, inside the book, but
Of course.
on the
Yeah.
cover, we want, like, grand, sweeping,
Yeah.
romantic, inspiring, If this photo on the cover of this book by Mandy Lee doesn't make you go on an RV trip, then I don't know what will. So we're gonna come back in a second, we're gonna dive into this episode, and we'll start by, Stephanie kinda walking through, like, some of these interesting changes that have occurred in the RV industry in the 10 years since we got started, and I think some surprising things that stayed the same. And then after that, we'll give you a sneak peek of the book and tell you what 40 vacations are in there and chat about some of our favorites. But before we do that, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Camco. Okay, welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here together, Stephanie and Jeremy, talking about the second edition of our book. It's in a series called Outdoor Adventure Guides. This one is titled RV Vacations, The second edition is coming out Tuesday. All right. This podcast is coming out Friday. On Tuesday, March 21st, 2023, this book will be in bookstores across the country. And that's actually a really cool part of this with this publisher. These bookstores or this book will be in bookstores across the country and, of course,
And it
available
always
on
has been.
Amazon. Yeah.
We found it across the country,
Yeah. They priced the
right?
book well.
Over our travels throughout the years.
If you pre-order it on Amazon today, it'll probably come in Tuesday or Wednesday when it's published. It's been completely refreshed. We would really encourage you to grab a copy. In this first second, we're going to talk to Stephanie, who did the refresh of the book for the second edition, about changes that she noticed in the RV and camping space. And remember, the first book came out in 2016, but we wrote it in 2015 based
Mhm.
on our experiences RVing from 2010 to 2015. So in a
Yeah.
sense, you're talking about like what has changed in the last decade loosely.
Yes.
And obviously, you had this global pandemic that changed so much. But I'm really interested in this because you and I have not talked through it too much ourselves, actually. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So the first thing you wanted to talk about in terms of changes in camping and RVing over the last decade is price, cost, right? Like so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
had prices
So,
listed in the 2016 edition. You had to refresh that part of the book. What did you find out?
okay, so I'm gonna say something that immediately everyone listening is gonna disagree with, and then I'm gonna explain what I mean. Okay? So everybody prepare yourself to be shocked and appalled by the words that are coming out of my mouth. All right. The first change, and I will note that I actually changed the structure of the pricing. We had numbers in the first book, this to this, right? In this book, we did the dollar signs, $1 sign, $2 signs, $3 signs, and gave people ranges for that. And we can talk more about why that change was absolutely necessary based on changes in the campground world, right? Okay, so the comment that I'm going to make is camping isn't getting more expensive.
Ah! I mean, I
Yeah,
actually
right.
well, I saw it in your notes and I was like, "What is she talking about?" And like, I
Yeah,
was like I
okay.
was like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here is my qualifier for this. Most or many campgrounds have radically changed their value proposition. Okay. So I'll defend myself about camping not getting more expensive. When you look at the prices for the traditional campground, like state park, boondocking, national park campgrounds, they are not more expensive. And in fact, when you and believe me, because I was looking at hundreds of right? Like I was refreshing these. I was looking at the prices that they were, and then I was looking at the new prices. Interestingly enough, when you look at the campgrounds that are those like mom and pop side of the road KOA journey campgrounds, the prices are not that
You're
different.
you're you're totally right.
We are
I can
talk
back you up on
we are
this.
talking basic inflation. That's what we're talking. We are talking they have tracked to basic inflation.
And you mean listen,
Now
you mean I gotta say this.
mhm,
You said like the KOA journey, yes. But you mean like
yeah,
the private family-owned campground with full hookups and a small pool and a
yeah.
small playground
The
kinda
backyard pool,
campground.
yeah,
Like
the back
like
the
you're saying their
yeah, little
prices have not.
tetherball thing.
Yeah, no, and I'm
No,
working
they
on a project
haven't,
right
and
now
you can
too,
fight me
and
on
you're
this
right.
because
I'm not
I
going.
looked at the numbers. It feels wrong to say that, but it's right. Like, I did the numbers, I did the math. And then what happened is there is an extreme change in the value proposition of a certain kind of campground. So while a lot of these campgrounds were kind of staying the same and their prices weren't changing that much, there was this whole other group of campgrounds that became campgrounds on steroids, right? Like we put in multi-million-dollar water parks and we put in spas and we put in pizza delivery to your site and craft beer on tap in the visitor center and all of these kinds of things and we able to walk your dog for you in the afternoon. Just the value proposition of these kinds of places, it didn't exist 10 years ago. You're right, we wrote this book in 2015 based on, I feel like, a time period from 2010 to 2015 that was kind of before this huge shift. And we had mentioned it in the first book a little bit, like resorts are becoming more popular. People dumped so much money into these resort campgrounds. We were invited to Massey's Landing when it first opened, right? Like it was like they were like, we're doing something new, come see. That kind of campground is yesterday's news now. The Massey's campground is yesterday's news.
Well, yeah, they got it's, like, saturated certain parts of the country. There's tons of these RV resorts. They are more expensive because there were sort of capital improvements made that they had
Mhm.
to recoup money on, but then also and there's still people out there listening to this podcast disagreeing with you, going, "She's crazy."
Oh, okay, well,
You
then
have
I'll
to talk
explain
well,
the
no,
rest of it,
the
yeah.
yeah, the dynamic
Yeah.
pricing aspect of it is a huge
Mhm.
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and so also I'll say, um, they're also speaking to a different client, right? So that's another the value proposition. They're trying to attract people that would normally stay at a hotel or a rental VRBO Airbnb, right? So they're going after a hospitality segment that didn't used to stay at campgrounds, and that's changing the pricing dynamic.
Oh my
And
god, you
in
got
those campgrounds. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you're saying so many interesting things. That is such a big part of this dynamic. So through
Yeah.
COVID, all of these new people got into camping, and all of
Mhm.
those people were used to paying more for their vacations and paying more for their
Mhm.
nightly accommodations. So for them,
Yep.
looking at $180 a night, $200 a night for, Massey's Landing or wherever it might be, depending what part of the country you're in, wasn't as shocking as it was to people who had been RVing for 20 years and were like, all of a sudden, like, whoa. But here's the rub, here's the problem. So all those people that became new to RVing during COVID were like, okay, fine. Oh, we'll pay that price. We're used to it. We went on a cruise and that was it. What they didn't know, or what they are starting to learn, is that you also got to take care of your RV. If
Yeah,
something
yeah, it's
breaks in
tricky.
your RV, you don't call the front desk and say the heat's not working. Like
They won't move your room.
if you're at Massey's Landing and you're like, "My furnace broke my
Yeah,
RV, let me call the front desk." They're
yeah.
not gonna come, right? So,
The value proposition is
but a
different,
huge
right?
part of why
Like
camping's and RVing's been cheaper all these years is that we bring the accommodation with us, and
yeah,
we're responsible for anything in it that breaks, unlike on a cruise or a hotel room. So that's where
yeah.
this whole thing is a problem for me, because if you're charging as much as a hotel room, some people are just gonna say, "Well, I'm gonna go to a hotel room."
Yeah, I didn't say that I'm okay with the price increase in this one segment, right? We've talked about that. You know, I say no. I used to say, oh, the resort, when the resorts were in that 1 to 120 range, I used to say that's worth it. We don't spend money. We're at the campground. The kids are entertained. I can order like food from the snack bar. Loved it. Now at 180 and 200, you know, and you can tell everybody I'm being honest here. I say no all the time. I say that's
I
not worth
think
it. I'm
one of
not
the
paying
only
that
places
all the
you
time.
I the only one of the only places in the country I could convince you to pay that is Fort Wilderness, and I think other than
Yeah.
that, we're checking out on that price point.
Yeah, absolutely 100% checking out on it. So, and then the one last part of the price that I'll mention with this is you flagged it before, the dynamic pricing. So this is what we had to do, and this is why I said we went to that like $1 sign, $2 sign, $3 sign, because campgrounds again, there's these old school campgrounds that I mentioned before. They still have the same prices, right?
Well, they
It's
didn't add
like
water parks. They didn't they
like
didn't put in the capital improvements that would make them raise their prices.
but I'm saying they're even the same price on a Tuesday as a Friday. Like, and in at this month and that month, like a lot of these, like the state parks, the COEs, like some of them have like off season and high season, but for the pretty much like there's a price for the campground. So there's still this whole segment of campgrounds where prices have not really changed that much. And then there's this whole other segment, value prop has changed, dynamic pricing was introduced. This has been going on forever in the hotel business, but the campground industry woke up to dynamic pricing after we published the first edition of this book. And that meant that somebody that was going to camp on a Friday at the same exact campground, at the same exact campsite, was going to pay a remarkably higher price than the person camping there on Tuesday.
This is gigantic right now. So, if you're the traditional kind of family camper who goes on Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, you get a week off in the summer, unfortunately, you are paying the highest prices in the land. for camping.
Mhm.
Where if you are retired and maybe a lot of retired RVers leave for their RV trips Monday, and come home Friday. You are paying significantly less. I mean, the family camper at particularly at RV resorts is getting hammered. And I think that's what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going to more modest state parks or the little mom and pops, or you have flexibility as to when you camp, the pricing is not super, super different.
Yeah. You if you wanna camp, right? Because we all know that this is right, people are like, "Oh, that's not camping," right? Like, if you wanna do what people would call camping, you can still do it. And we can even I mean, like, we even are still finding prices in places that we will fairly pay. Like, we're doing it for both. We have our sweet spot for prices for both spring break, right? Where it's at a resort, but it's not,
I was
like,
fine
on
with the
drugs.
price we're paying for a
Yeah.
resort at spring break. I looked at the
Yes.
price, I was like, "It's
And
not
then the summer
cheap."
too. Yeah, it's not cheap, that's not what I'm saying, but it is a reasonable value
Well, let me
proposition to
talk
me.
about the summer super quickly. Without gi
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna name the names of the campgrounds, you can figure out so
No,
easily if you
yeah.
want. So, we're going to Cape Hatteras, the boys are really into surfing, and we wanted a full hookup site near the beach. And there's 2 campgrounds basically right next door to each other that at the end of the day, like, both are about the same level of niceness. Like, maybe one's a little more for kids, one's a little more for adults. The price difference between the 2 campgrounds was, like, a radical difference. So I think you're starting to see that where some places are adjusting their prices back down a little, and some people are sticking to the COVID prices that got really, really high. Alright, so that's our
Yeah.
whole do you anything
Okay.
else to say on price, or do you wanna move on, talk
No,
about,
no,
like
that's
yeah,
enough,
that was a lot
That
because
that was enough shocking, but I hope everybody understands what I'm saying.
okay, no, reservations have changed.
Yeah.
How?
So, yeah. I mean, so this is just we there was when we got into camping, we bought our pop-up, and in 2010, 2009, 2010, we were given a coupon book, and we were calling campgrounds to make reservations. I cannot stress the extent to which that was still the case when we were writing this book. Campgrounds did not have online reservation systems, hardly, right?
We had
There
to
was a
mail in
few, like
checks. We had to write checks and
yeah,
mail checks to campgrounds.
yeah, for deposits, right? This has been completely disrupted and mostly by one company that introduced an internal reservation system for a chain of campgrounds or a campground franchise. This happened in a couple of franchises. So these campgrounds had the ability to manage reservations online within their own franchise. So they didn't have to use like an online booking system like Reserve America or reservation.gov, right? So this happened. I feel like this started to really gain speed probably like when we were writing the book, like probably a lot of the KOAs and Jellystones were reservable online at that point, correct?
KOA had a good online reservation system before most people.
Yeah. And now even as much as everybody was like it was virtually impossible to use those reservation systems for the state parks and the national parks like reservation.gov, as much as I don't think anybody is still like a tremendous fan of those sites, they have come a long way, baby. Okay. Now the ability to navigate those sites to see what sites are available and what hookups are there and all of that, I mean, the difference is night and day between what you can figure out on the website and what you could before.
Well, for if you've been listening to this podcast for 9 years, like a lot of people have, you'll remember me complaining all not complaining, but just saying, "Call the campground, call the campground. That's my tip. Call the campground. You'll get the best site if you
Yeah.
call the campground." That's not as true anymore.
Mhm.
It pains me to say it. That's not as true anymore because the online booking systems have gotten a lot better, and in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
you can see a picture of every single campsite. So, like, even for the
Right.
Delaware State Park system, or if you use CampSpot a lot of the time, there's pictures of the sites, and that's really what I wanna see. I wanna see the site I'm getting. So, if an online system is smooth and easy to use, and you have a campground map, and then you can click on the site and see a picture of the site, I don't feel the need to call the campground anymore myself after all those years of saying that. I still think it's not a bad idea, though.
I think you still called, like, I think you were still on the phone with somebody from our
Well, they get
summer
lonely there now because
reservation.
everyone's booking
I think that
online.
you
So
were I think
you
that you
have
were
these camp store
harassing the
worker.
woman,
I
and then
take
you were saying to me and then you were like, "Well, it's between this site and this site, and she says this about this site and this about that
You know what I
site."
always
I
ask
was
them?
like, "Oh my gosh."
Here's my magic money question. What site would you pick? I always say that. I was like, "If you were reserving for a week, what site would you pick?" I think that kinda
Yeah.
crystallizes it. But anyway, yes, I still do it sometimes, but I book online quite a lot more. So the reservations game has definitely shifted more online. If you have anything else you wanna say about reservations changing, tell us. If not, you wanted to talk about the number of, campgrounds in the book that, when looking at the first book from 2016 and
Yeah.
revising it, a lot of the campgrounds that we had listed in 2016 had been purchased. They still exist, but they had been purchased.
Oh my gosh. So, very few campgrounds were closed, right? And you have to understand how remarkable this is in the travel industry, okay? The majority of the changes in this book did not have to come from the campgrounds. I mean, the descriptions of the campgrounds had to change, right? Because it's like, oh, like, I'm looking. Do they still have a pancake breakfast? Do they have now a heated pool? You know what I mean? So the descriptions had to change. But I had to change far more of the restaurants because they had closed and far more of the activities, like, because maybe a vendor wasn't available anymore or whatever. Um, in the travel industry, I think having this many stable accommodations 5 years out, how many years? 6, 7, 8, however many years out it is from
You
2016
were right. We
publishing.
were
I
writing this
can't
in
do math.
2015. It's 8 years ago that we were writing
Yeah.
it.
So 8 years ago. So the number is remarkable, I think, that we're stable.
So it's a stable
Um,
industry. If you wanna open a
it's a
campground,
stable
it's a stable
industry.
industry.
The thing that there were 2 major changes. First, KOA went through that real push for branding, right? So KOA went through this whole thing where they really wanted people to be journey, holiday, or resort. And it was amazing how I could see what the pickup on that was by doing this book because I had to change any KOA in the book. And there's a lot of KOAs in the book, guys, and that's because it's an idiot's guide and it was supposed to be an intro to RVing. And KOAs are great for people that are traveling long distance on RV vacations that don't want to go off a dirt road and find a boondocking spot. So, that was one of the major changes. So many KOAs had different names because of that rebranding exercise that they did. The second thing that was a major change was how many of the independent campgrounds that were in the book were now owned by campground, can I call them conglomerate? Because it
Yeah,
feels like a
large
conglomerate.
companies by large companies.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say specifically, the Sun land grab,
They
right?
bought
I
tons and
mean,
tons of campgrounds.
the number of campgrounds that were not Sun resorts or Sun properties when we wrote this book, and we had called out these campgrounds for being really nice, resorty kind of campgrounds. Well, Sun basically, I don't know if they were using our book as a shopping list or what,
They just went
but
and
they
bought a
were
lot of
going
them.
around snapping them all up. So I'm actually concerned, right? Because this is print in a nutshell. We finished the revisions on this book, I think, in early July of 2022. I'm honestly concerned that there's more Sun properties in this book, like that they
Oh, that'll
actually
change
acquired
before it.
even
Oh
more.
my god, right. So in other words, that there
Yeah.
might be 1 or 2 that have inaccurate names because
Yes,
they've been acquiring,
because this
yeah?
is happening at such
But
a
the
rapid pace.
with Google search though, like, you could still Google search seashore campsites, which became a Sun
Mhm.
property 6 years ago, I don't know, and it'll come up though. So
Oh,
if you're
every single one. They always do that, and that's just SEO. Like, these campgrounds they're not dum-dums, like, they know to make sure that when you're looking for a former campground, you're gonna find the new one.
the
Yeah, so it'll still be there. I don't think they'll
no,
close
no,
them, but
Sun's the dominant player there, but there's other
oh, yeah.
conglomerates too, like, coming out of nowhere, there's now this Spacious Skies
I
group of
know, and
campgrounds,
I've
which
got
is
my
there's like
eyes on
yeah,
them.
there's like 4 they have 14 campgrounds, like, where did they come from?
So
I wanna
there's spacious side campgrounds in the book. Do you
Yeah,
know what their
well,
one of their first was?
no.
You don't know? The Luray.
Oh,
The
yeah, what
Luray
was the
KOA.
KOA is now
What
Spacious Skies.
was
Yeah,
the
I knew
KOA
that, but I
is
didn't know
now a
that.
Spacious Skies, and I didn't know really what this company was up to. I was just keeping an eye on it, and all of a sudden, and it's because, it doesn't happen all of a sudden, but then they decided to basically do a big PR branding push, and now,
Well,
they're out there.
they bought a campground an hour away from us in, like,
Mhm.
Dorothy, New Jersey, which I'm gonna be real honest, I never really wanted to go to. It didn't look super nice. They bought it. They're doing all kinds of revitalizations to the property. I'm sure the prices will go up, but now I wanna go to it. So,
Yeah, but I think that what they're doing is from what I can tell, and we can, hey, let's have somebody on the company to talk. I'm interested in this. I don't, um, what I think they're doing, it seems to me, this is my prediction. They're looking for those more traditional camping campgrounds, not the resort campground. That's what I
full
feel like is
hookups,
happening.
pool,
Yes.
playground, some nice amenities. I think there's a
Clean,
space in the market
simple.
for that. I think there's plenty
I
of
do
people
too.
who wanna pay 60,
Mhm.
to $80 a night for that, depending what part of the country you're in, and not pay the resort prices. I think there's a huge gap in the market if that's what they're doing. I think that's pretty smart. Okay, so that was another big thing that you noticed. You also noticed more length of stay requirements and price lock
Mm.
fees and different cancellation requirements. Maybe a lot of things that used to be kind of free and easy and consumer friendly are now a little bit more strict. Is that what you were seeing?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Length of stay requirements, there was, like, one campground that we knew of with a length of stay requirement. Remember that? What is it?
Oh, the
Otter
Otter
Lake
Creek,
or
Otter Creek, Pennsylvania.
what are those? Yeah. I mean, for years, I can't be it was like, "We can't go there. They need to have a 7-night minimum," and that
Yeah.
was, like, the only one. Like, nobody had a length of stay. There are so many of the big new resort campgrounds that, have instituted this. During the high season, right? Like, during the summer season, there is a 7-day requirement, and for some of them, this is Airbnb stuff, right? This is like if you ever rented houses down in Hatteras, the house was rented from Saturday to Saturday. I don't care when you can get
You
there. The
did
house
don't
is
call asking for a 3-day house rental.
no, it's Saturday to Saturday. And you saw this really take hold in the campground industry as I was looking at the different requirements and everything. Price lock fees did not exist back then. Now there's entire booking segments that they say, look, you can guarantee a type of site. This is like the hotel industry, right?
You
I can
said price
guarantee you
lock
that
fees. Do you mean site lock fees?
yes, site lock fees, yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
sorry.
So, yeah, like, in a hotel, it'd be like, "I can guarantee you a king suite. I'm not gonna guarantee you the 309 king suite," right? That whole process moved to the campground industry. So, a lot of old school campers are very used to being able to have the site that they want. Like, I get this. So, campgrounds are really crafty. They were like, "Okay, we know people like that. So what we'll do is we'll say, "Okay, that's still an option, but you're gonna pay us for it, and
And
you're gonna pay us an
were they
extra
like
40 bucks."
20 bucks, 25, 30 bucks, 50 bucks? Like, what were you seeing with the
Well,
price on that?
it wasn't, negligible. Like, when I was seeing some of the prices in, like, the 40s and stuff, but then some of them were, like, per night prices, right? So it was like a tack on of an additional, say, $15 per night. So then that would add up based on how long your stay was.
Oh, some of them
So
are per
definitely
night.
different methods of it. Yeah, I
I
saw a
paid
couple
the
of per
site
nights.
lock fee for spring break, but it was like 20 or 25, and I was grumpy. Like, I was like, "Oh god," but I wanted a site that I
But
wanted. Yeah.
yeah.
So the last thing you have in your notes here for changes, we talked about a little bit already, but let me just see if you have anything else you want to say about it. Like you seem to have been shocked about how few of the campgrounds had closed. Like almost all of the campgrounds were still open 8 years later. That they had
Yeah, I
changed
think
names or changed ownership
I
or
didn't
whatever.
keep track, and I should have kept track. I could go, but I feel like there was, like, 3 or 4 campgrounds that were, like, not campgrounds anymore. Like, that's
That
it.
amazes me.
Yeah. Everything else was just, um, being sold, right, or being bought, or being rebranded in some way. shape or form. So it's like I don't really so sometimes you don't really know what happened. Like you don't know if ownership changed or, or if they just became a different franchise. Some people leave franchises, so we know this. Like somebody might leave the Jellystone
Or
franchise and
KOA,
become a
yeah,
different.
it happens a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't happen with
Mhm.
a every year, there's a couple campgrounds that leave, and that hopefully
Mhm.
for them, there's more that come in. So,
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you so much for this walk down memory lane here, camping then and now. I actually do remember our publisher asking us, like, "Well, if you're gonna do a print book on this stuff, because so much of it's on the internet, are all these campgrounds gonna go out of business or their name's gonna
Mhm.
change?" And that was actually a concern that we were asked about, and I remember we said 8 years ago, "No, campground industry is kinda stable. I don't think a lot of it's gonna change." And we were right. So it still makes
It
sense
is,
to write
yeah.
books about things because books are slow-moving objects compared
There's
to the
so
internet.
much infrastructure involved in a campground, right? I mean, the site building, the hookups, like that's a lot of infrastructure. So there's value in that infrastructure. This isn't like a restaurant that could be another restaurant that could be another
It's
restaurant,
hard to
right?
turn
Like
a
you
campground
don't
into
take
a
a camp.
strip mall.
Yes, exactly. So, there's a lot of things that kind of play into that stability.
And of course, the market boomed for camping over COVID, right? I mean, that probably
Mhm.
destabilized a whole lot. Okay, we're going to come back in a second and give you a sneak peek into the second edition of our book, RV Vacations, which is coming out March 21st. But first, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Yogi Bear's Jellystone Park Camp Resorts. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Now we are going to give you a sneak peek of our book called RV Vacations, which gives you the 40 best RV vacations in the country, as determined by Jeremy and Stephanie and our editors at Penguin Random House, who told me to axe Cooperstown all those years ago. So the book's split into
Editors.
editors. We've had very good editors for all of our books.
We
We're very
have.
lucky.
Lovely.
The book is split into 5 regions, okay? So we have the Northeast, the South, the Midwest, the Southwest, and the West. So let's just tell you what vacations we covered in each of those regions pretty quickly and just share a few of our favorites from over the years. So in the Northeast, we did Acadia National Park, White Mountains, New Hampshire, Vermont fall foliage. So some of the vacations were also about going a certain time of year, a little bit of a theme. Cape Cod, Massachusetts, Lake George and the Adirondacks, Niagara Falls, New York City. We had some urban camping in here. Pennsylvania Dutch Country. They axed Cooperstown, but they let us do Pennsylvania Dutch Country. Okay. And Washington, D.C. Now, out of
Yeah.
those great RV vacations, and for each of those, we have 3 campground reviews, 3 restaurant reviews, 3 attractions, itineraries, highlights, fun facts. The chapters are really cool. Which of those was your favorite RV vacation, Stephanie?
Okay, first of all, in defense of our editors, how many great campgrounds are there in the Dutch country area
True.
compared to the Cooperstown area?
And the food.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it really is a little bit more of a
Yeah,
destination.
Cooperstown's like
So
just about baseball.
I'm gonna I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. But okay, which of these is my favorite? You can know how I feel about. I mean, that's like, oh, which is the most epic? Of course, everybody knows I love Acadia, National Park. So wah wah. That's a boring answer, but it's true.
Well, and it's probably I would agree with that answer. It's the combination of the mountains and the sea in one national park. So that's my favorite,
But
and
I love all of
I
these
know you hate
destinations are
questions like
amazing
this.
destinations, and I do like the fact that it's kind of been a little bit of our signature, and it's true in all of our other books too, to include those non-traditional camping locations like New York City and Washington, DC. Washington, DC has been a family, um, like,
A
why is
perennial
the
favorite.
word?
We go back year
Yeah,
after year
a
to Cherry Hill.
tradition. How did
Yeah.
I not have the word tradition in my head?
Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
is a great, RV destination. I'm not saying every city in the country is a great RV destination. Washington,
right.
D.C. happens to be one because
Yeah.
predominantly because of Cherry Hill. I mean, there's other camping options in and around the city, but Cherry Hill's a massive RV resort. You can almost always get a site there. You really can. And it makes
Yeah.
visiting Washington, D.C. in an RV an absolute pleasure. Okay, so in the
Pleasure.
South, I'm wearing my glass. I'm getting used to wearing glasses, everybody, long time listeners. It's not easy for me. In the South,
Well, yeah. Mr. 2020 vision until he was completely blind for like 3 years and
It
refused
it
to
hap
acknowledge
it
it.
happened fast. Okay, in the South, we did the Civil War battlefield tour, that's really cool. Shenandoah National Park, which we love and think is underrated. The Kentucky Bourbon Trail, so again, there are some thematic vacations in here where you have to do some road
Yeah.
tripping, which is really cool. Mammoth Cave National Park gets a chapter. Memphis and Graceland get a chapter. And Great Smoky Mountains National Park obviously gets a chapter. So, shall I take a turn and oh wait, and there's more, I'm sorry. Um,
Yeah.
Cape Hatteras National Seashore, Myrtle Beach, New Orleans, which isn't actually a debatably another great city for an RV trip.
Mhm.
You can actually bring your RV right into the city. And it's safe. Walt Disney World makes it into the book, and the Florida Keys. Now, I'll say 2 things about this chapter. My favorite
Mm.
vacation here is Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and we've done that trip twice. I mean, which shows you how much we love it. We went back. There are certain national parks that we love that we may never get back to in our lives. We went back to Great Smokies. Also, I'm we've been to you and I have been to Cape Hatteras National Seashore so many times, and
Yeah.
we're planning on going
We've
back
been
this summer
to
with the boys. And
Myrtle Beach so many
oh,
times. We've
I
been to
know.
Walt Disney World
I
so
know.
many
Yeah,
times.
The
This
South is our playground for RVing because
Yeah.
we in the Northeast, often want to get to warmer locations. And anyone
Yeah.
from the Northeast, like, does a lot of RVing in the South typically. Okay. So, then the Midwest, all right? So in the Midwest, and I think we got a little bit of slack from people that there wasn't enough from the
Well,
Midwest
they
here.
were saying that. Okay, so here's the thing. There was a little bit of back and forth about that because they were like, "Well, there's less in the Midwest." And we were like, "Because this isn't like the best whatever in every region. This is the best 40 RV vacations." And I know you people in the Midwest love where you live, but you can't say that there's better RVing vacations to be had in the Midwest than in the West. Like, come on. Does anybody like,
I
I don't argue
I
that out New
will
Jersey. I'm not like, "Oh, New Jersey has better campgrounds
I
than
will
Wyoming."
I'll defend the Northeast till the end of time for having all kinds of amazing RV destinations, but I'm done that stage in my life where I'll try to make the case that it's as good as the West. I'm done. I will admit,
Yeah.
okay, the West, you win. Okay, the iconic RV vacation is to the national parks
Yeah.
of the West. All right, but the
Yeah.
Midwest, we have
100%.
a chapter on Hocking Hills, Ohio. We have a
Mhm. Which is
chapter on
beautiful. Yeah.
beautiful. We have a chapter on Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore in Michigan, which shockingly a lot of people don't know where that is. Um,
Yeah.
then there's a special feature on Traverse City Craft Brewery Tour. All right, there's a lot of fun stuff for the
Mhm.
adults in this book. And then, of course, there's a chapter on Mount Rushmore and the Badlands in South Dakota, which a lot of people think of as being the West, but I guess technically it's the far west of the Midwest. So,
Yes.
Stephanie, what is and I know you hate favorites. So I'll ask you it this
No.
way.
Oh, well, okay, this one's easy. Sleeping Bear Dunes is I was
Oh,
just
over
telling
Mount Rushmore.
somebody. No, I love Sleeping Bear Dunes. I was just telling somebody the other day and I'll tell you why. I was saying, "You gotta go here," because it is such a kid-friendly vacation destination, like, outdoor national lakeshore vacation destination. So kid-friendly. Like, just the swimming, the dune climbs, it's dog-friendly, like, it's just a great location. I feel like it encapsulates some of the most special RV adventures that we ever had as a family.
You're right. It's very safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Yellowstone there's actual real danger
No.
for young
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Sleeping Bear Dunes, most of it's, pretty safe, but still very adventurous. All right, we're going to come
Mhm.
back in a second and just take a look at the other two regions that we cover in RV vacations, the second edition of our book that's coming out Tuesday, March 21st. But before we wrap up the show, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Go RVing. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are just giving you a sneak peek of our book, RV Vacations, which is coming out in its second edition on Tuesday, March 21st, available for pre order right now. We did a huge section on the Southwest. So in the Southwest, we have a chapter on Route 66, but focused on Tulsa to Oklahoma City. We did not attempt to do a chapter on the
Yeah.
entire length of Route
Well,
66.
because you could only pick 3, like, the template was 3 campgrounds,
Right.
3 restaurants, 3 attract like, how do you do all of Route 66? That makes no sense.
There is a special
So
feature on top Route 66 attractions. There's a chapter that combines Austin and San Antonio. Sometimes we had to make hard decisions like that, like either combine them or leave one out or the other. I know a lot of people
well,
would
that was, like, hill
certainly
country, and we really enjoyed we did a vacation that was more of, like, hill country in that area, and we thought that that was a great way to see the area, so that's why we made that decision.
100% true. Tucson, Arizona, and of course the Grand Canyon. Out of these vacations, I loved our trip to Texas. And
Yeah, it was a good one.
I loved Austin and San Antonio, and here's what I'll say about both of those cities. For me anyway, I don't wanna speak for you. We did not spend enough time in either of them. We were like a day in Austin, a day in San Antonio. Like, I really like to slow travel and soak up a place and really experience, like, the food and the culture and the people, and I
Mhm.
felt like that was just one of those instances where we moved too quickly. Or like a trip like, our South Dakota trip, we just took our time and did 14 days in South Dakota. But San Antonio and Austin, I felt like we rushed through. Okay,
Yeah,
now
I mean,
the
in general, I think the whole hill country was a great and that is, like, to me, an underrated destination.
It is, and I think that regionally it's not. I think Texans know, "Oh, this is an awesome spot for a
Yeah.
vacation," but I don't think that people on the East Coast and the West Coast think of it, and plus Texas is really, really far away if
It's
you're from the
far from everybody
it's
except
far.
people in Texas, and even some people in Texas, it's far
Oh, no,
for
it's
them.
if you live in Texas, Texas is far from Texas.
Like,
You could you could live in Texas and be like, "Yeah, that part of Texas is really far."
that's
Yeah,
far.
Big Bend National Park, I'll never get there, it's Texas, but it's far Texas. Alright, the West. We did Rocky Mountain National Park. We did a chapter
Yeah.
on arches. Then we combined Zion and Bryce Canyon in a chapter. We did Las Vegas, which again is
Mhm.
probably one of the best cities in the country for RV travel. Absolutely very RV friendly. We did San Diego. We did Napa Valley in San Francisco. We did the California Gold Rush tour. I loved the thematic chapters, not a ton of
Yeah.
them, but definitely the
It
book
was
is
fun.
flavored by the thematic chapters. And I think honestly, Stephanie, I give you credit for those because I really think that you kind of concocted a lot of the thematic chapters here, as opposed to just being like a national park. We did Yosemite. We did Portland, Oregon. So there's a lot of urban camping in this book. If you are interested in taking your RV to cities and to urban locations, there's plenty in here. We did a coastal Washington lighthouse tour, another thematic one. We did Olympic National Park, which longtime listeners know that's my favorite national park. We did Glacier. Then we combined Yellowstone and Grand Teton, which, you know, 8 years ago we did
Well,
that.
I think
Today
that's
I wouldn't.
oh,
I
come
personally wouldn't.
on. All
I
right.
know they're right next
I
to each
would, I
other. I
still would,
know, I
and in
know.
fact, I helped somebody plan, like, they had they were flying into Jackson, and they were like, "What do" and I was like, "Look, here's your route. You're gonna go up through the Teton" like, I
I'm
still
not saying
combine
they're
it.
I'm not saying you're right. You're right. It is one RV vacation. If you go to Yellowstone and you just, like, don't go to Grand Teton, like, I don't that doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
that's bonkers.
They should be combined, but they should get a nice long chapter, and, I think in this book, we
Oh,
weren't quite allowed to
okay,
do
so
that.
you're saying you're just yeah, you're okay, I get that, like, separate chapters, but,
For
like,
this
one
book,
trip, so
yeah.
that's why they should be one chapter because they are a great single trip.
In Where Should We Camp Next National Parks, which comes out in April, they just get a really long chapter. And then finally, we did, a feature on top photo spots in Glacier, Yellowstone, and Grand Teton. So, Stephanie, in the West, either tell me what was one of your favorite vacations in the West, or tell
Gosh.
me where you want to go back to. Like, where would you wanna do I know you don't like playing favorites. So fine, if you don't wanna play
No.
favorites, what place is calling you back for another RV vacation?
Oh gosh. I don't know. This chapter is particularly hard, right? Okay, I will say how about San Diego? That I'm gonna do a really wild card pick here. San Diego, okay?
Yeah. We wanna take the
Because it's
boys there.
different. Yeah, the boys wanna go there, so that would be fun. So it would be fun to go back with them when they're older and they're surfing. They're surfing now a lot and everything, so they really wanna
I feel like a
head to
lot of
San
our
Diego.
future vacations are going to be centered around surfing with our kids right
Oh,
now.
because yeah, if we let them run the world.
Well, but you look, we also love the beach though,
Yeah, no, no,
right?
I
So
love
we
San
we
Diego,
could
so it's not like a chore for me to go back there, but there's just a reason for everybody, so that's my dark pick from
all right,
that list, yeah.
Stephanie, make your final pitch, and we'll wrap up the show. Why do you think everybody should go out and grab a copy of RV Vacations, second edition?
I think yeah, I think that if you want somebody else to make the choices for you, this is such a great book, right? There's some people who, like, their bandwidth is like, "I really wanna use my RV, I really wanna have a great vacation." Jeremy and I think, are really good at knowing, like, what a lot of people will enjoy, right? We're not trying to be edgy, we're not trying to be cool, and we're not trying to be like, "Oh, we know something that nobody else knows." We're like, "Hey, these are really enjoyable itineraries, packed full of things that most people will enjoy." And if you want us this is a little bit like if you wanted us to make, like, really easy vacation itineraries for you. Take the decision making off the table. Our Where Should We Camp Next books offer a lot more options, right? Because we're trying to give you a bunch of different options and you can choose which ones are best. This, I think, is like a little tailor made, handmade over manual time, right? Here's a manual. Go have fun vacation.
In that sense, it's a great book for busy people. I mean, a lot of people
Yeah.
don't have countless hours to sort through to create a whole itinerary for an RV vacation. And frankly, we struggle with that, and but it's part of what
Yeah.
we do. And you're really good at this. Your imprint is all over this book. You're really good at mapping out not just like I'm really good at like we're gonna love this campground. Like pick there's 10 options in the Smokies, but we're gonna love this one. This one's right for our family. You're really better at mapping out a whole vacation. And a lot of people really enjoy that. And if that's the case, you can still buy this book and use it as one of many sources, right? As you
Yeah.
as you figure out
Yeah,
what you
that's
want to
what
do.
you would do. You'd be like, "Oh, this is a great vacation." Like, and it is. And then you dive in more in detail about more activities to do. But the sidebar itineraries, it's like 1 week, 2 week, 3 week. It really is like a big long list of things to do in that area.
Oh, you said
So
something
you
about
could
that
like
changed.
well, yeah, no, I mean, we talked about it, so I was looking at it, I was like, "Oh, I don't know." 1 week, 2 week, 3 week. I actually this is funny because I actually pushed for and I forgot where we landed on it, but I guess I didn't win. I wanted weekend,
Oh.
like,
Weekend week,
week
2 week.
yes, that's what I wanted because I feel like that was really how people travel differently, like, like a Vermont foliage long even I said, "Oh, can we do long weekend or something like that?" Right? So, yeah, that was a little bit of a discussion. I was like, "I thought I won that conversation, but when I look in it, I don't." But, hey, here's an inside scoop. Treat the itineraries like it's a long weekend, a week or 2 weeks.
Oh, you could read it differently.
Yeah,
It's like
you could read it
Stephanie's telling
like
you how to hack our own book. So
yeah.
instead of looking at it as a 1 week itinerary, a
1
2 week
week.
itinerary, and a 3 week itinerary, look at the first one as a long weekend itinerary, the
Yeah,
second one as a week-long
2 a
itinerary,
week, yeah.
and then the 3 week one, look at it as a 2 week. I like
It
it.
would be like long week, 7 like, long week, 5 to 7 days, 7 to 10 days, right? Because 'Cause isn't that how a lot of people vacation? Like, when I look at the, New York City, it's like 1 week is tour the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building and Rockefeller Center, visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the National September 11th Memorial Museum in Central Park, see a Broadway show, and walk the High Line, right? Like, that's a jam-packed long weekend, but a fun one.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
The last thing I'm gonna say after talking about this book, I really need a vacation. I don't
I
know
think you have
about
one coming
you.
up, dude.
What?
You got one
It's
coming up. It's right around the
three
corner.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. Gotta work hard, and then we get to go on our
Yeah.
our vacation. Hopefully, we get good weather. Thank you so much for taking on this project, and, thank you, Stephanie, for not listening to my initial gut response, which was, "No,
No.
we're too busy. No,"
No.
which is usually the
That's
other
in
way
the rear
around.
view mirror. It usually is.
You're
I'm
usually the
usually
one
much
like,
more willing
"No,
to
we
say
can't do it."
no.
But your
Yeah.
instinct, I'm proud of this product. I'm really,
Yeah.
excited that
Yeah, that's nice.
the second edition's coming out. And since you did the revision of the second edition, I will promise you right now on air that I will do the revision of the third edition if we ever have
All
the
right. We've got it
opportunity to do so.
recorded.
Thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you at the campground.
See you at the campground.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the RV Atlas.
To find out more about the topics discussed on this show, head on over to thervatlas.com.
And to join the friendliest group of RVers, head on over to the RV Atlas group on Facebook and make sure to join us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at the RV Atlas.
If you enjoy our show, please consider leaving us a review over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
And we will see you at the campground.
See you at the campground.